Diversity is killing video games. No, it's not. Diversity is killing video games. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is the new buzzword for right-wing grifters, as we all know. And unfortunately, within video games as an industry, as a community, seems to attract a lot of alt-right people, a lot of right-wing grifters. I mean, for obvious reasons. And at the moment, their latest buzzword, their latest thing that they're clinging on to make money is that diversity is the reason that there are so many bad video games at the moment. And if you are a man that believes diversity is killing video games, you're probably not going to want to listen to the woman with dyed hair and her pronouns in her bio. But whilst you watch this video, I want you to just sort of sit with the thought that who did you hear this from? Where did this consensus come from? Because the lightness is you heard it from people who want to make money off of you. Not necessarily from your own pocket, but from your time, from your attention, from your anger. And I know that's very hard to hear. And I know that's probably not what you want to hear. But if you are on that thought train, I just want you to sit with that little thought and maybe just listen to what I'm about to say before you type that little angry comment that I can feel writhing around in your brainworms. The thing is, I'm not going to go into like the whole right-wing red pill grift that has been going on for many years that is very rife within gaming culture, because that's a whole other video and there are a lot of people that can explain it a lot better than I can in this moment in time. But I do want you to remember that the people that push this ideal that left-wing progressivism and diversity and inclusion and equity and all that are bad are doing so because it makes them money. They know if they make a video with something like that in the title or something like that in the thumbnail or that catchy first phrase in a TikTok, it's going to get your attention, it's going to get your anger, it's going to validate your feelings. And so they know that off of the attention and the anger you give them, they can make so much money from it. It is such a grift, such a profitable thing to do, to be anti-left, to be anti-DEI, to be anti-liberal. It makes them so much money. And so they keep making these videos and these articles and these tweets, despite there being no evidence for direct correlation between diversity in games and the amount of games that have failed. I don't want to go too deep into it, but I want to keep this video light-ish. But in terms of measuring data for the phrase diversity is killing video games, I don't know how we would. Like, I don't know how someone could make that statement. I don't know how someone could come across this causation. Because firstly, there's no way to quantify diversity. There are so many factors that go into diversity, and also diversity within media, you know, authentic stories, the characters, the setting, who's telling it, who's it written by, who made it. There's just no way to quantify it. So in using diversity in this phrase, it's sort of like this ideal people have come up with where they just see more characters of color and they just see more women in games, and they've called it diversity without actually analyzing what that means. Secondly, the people saying this also, what are the parameters for what makes a failure of a game within this phrase? Obviously, there are definite failures. Concord, very sadly, being one of them recently, which shut down after a week. I think we can all, as a consensus, agree that that was not a hit of a game. It was definitely a flop. But then there are others that I've had men in my own comments go back and forth about constantly. I've had people tell me that Apex is a flop, Overwatch is a flop, or even that Last of Us 2 is a failure, even though it sold 10 million copies. And that's only because the first one sold more, which isn't really how we measure the hit or failure of a game. Because if that's the case, Toy Story 1 flopped, I guess, because all the sequels made more money and sold more. I think we can all agree that that is bonkers to say. Additionally, there are games that have done well with what right-wing people would define as a diverse cast. But again, how do you define that? Who knows? So I'm just going to go with their ideal of what diverse means, which is just anyone that is not a white man, I guess. Horizon Zero Dawn is a good game. It's an amazing story, characters are fleshed out, combat's great, and it had a woman protagonist. The Last of Us Part 1, which also has a female protagonist, is a masterpiece, we can all agree. When Overwatch 1 released, it sold 7 million copies in its first week, just in 1 week. And it had multiple female characters, multiple non-white characters. Like, again, how do we measure diversity? I'm just going with what I assume they think is diversity, which is just anyone not a guy and anyone not white. That's diversity then. But you guys get what I'm trying to say. We've had games that have had diverse characters, diverse settings, and have not flopped and have done exponentially well. These right-wing grifters like to make this link between diversity and the rise of bad games, but it actually has nothing to do with that. In fact, these two things generally don't interact during game development. Gameplay and character or story or narrative design are completely different departments. Of course, they interact because they're in the same game, but it's not like one forces another. They work together. And really the only time that the character would affect the gameplay is if they have abilities that are driven by their backstory or by their character, who they are. But other than that, who you're playing as does not affect the gameplay. So I don't really see why it matters whether it's a woman, a person of color, a queer person. I don't understand why this matters. And I also I can't get in the headspace of where people get this idea from that diversity is ruined. I don't know how they correlate. I mean, they don't. That's why. If you look at a game like Overwatch or Apex, the characters usually have their backstory and that influences what abilities they have within the game. But if you look at a game like COD, particularly like their Battle Royale, you are just a person and you just win. It's got nothing to do, like, who you play as does not affect the gameplay in any way. You could be playing you can play as Nicki Minaj if you want. If you are still watching and you're along the brainwave of diversity is killing video games, your ears might close up at this part. And I understand, because it's exasperating to hear this if you're already in that mindset. So I beg you, just keep your ears open for a little bit. Just be curious. The rise of bad or failing games is not coming from increased diversity. It's coming from, you're gonna hate me for saying it, it's coming from capitalism. It's coming from executives who are majority white men, by the way, simply just being money hungry. Gaming as an industry has bolstered in the last few years. It has grown exponentially. It is worth billions. It is a great way to make money. And the execs at the top have seen the success of like Fortnite and Valorant, which are live service games, and they've seen how much money they make. Live service games can be huge money makers. They cost way less to upkeep than creating a whole new game. They require fewer staff, less money, less resources, less allocated environments, and you can just continuously bring cash in through skins and emotes, sounds, music. We've seen it with Fortnite, arguably one of the most successful battle royales ever. They're making so much money. So executives saw this and were like, oh, we're gonna make a game that we can just continuously rake money in from. And unfortunately, not all games are meant to be live service games. That's why we've had games like Suicide Squad. That's why we've had games like Skull and Bones that just didn't really hit it off with their audience. And is this true for all games that have flopped recently? No, not all of them have been live service games. But there are also thousands of factors that go into a game failing, whether it's lack of marketing, bad gameplay, lack of news coverage, how did early access go? But none of these issues are diversity of the cast or stories or environments, anything like that. In fact, there's a lot of data and research that suggests the more diverse your workplace is, the more diverse content you put out, whether it be through marketing or media, the higher the return on your investment. It's also important to note that people are releasing so many more games now than they were like a decade ago. Studios are expanding and they're working faster, they're working to shorter deadlines. So many more indie companies are opening up and releasing games. So many smaller like AA companies are being bought by bigger companies to release games. And obviously the more games they release, the more chance there is for failure, because we are living within this like short attention economy at the moment. I think it's incredibly important to remember what we all learned in middle school, that correlation does not equal causation. There has been a rise in diversity within games over the last few years because finally, after years and years of various marginalized groups banging at doors trying to get into gaming, we are finally able to work in games. Still as a minority, by the way, it's still majority white men working in games in the West. We're finally able to influence stories so that they represent us. So it represents those working on them, those playing them. It represents the player base now. And this happening is completely separate from any bad gameplay you might see in a game. They're completely unrelated. If you've watched this far, it is either because we are on the same page, as we know that diversity is indeed not killing games, or you are hate watching to get that nice little dopamine of anger. But I can't do anything for you if you are the latter. All I can do is implore you to open your mind. If you are being told, or if you are consuming content where you are consistently being told that diversity is killing video games and is the reason that seemingly a lot of games are bad at the moment, you're probably being grifted for your attention. These people want you to be angry because it gets them views, it makes them money. You want your feelings validated and you want to feel a part of a community, and so you watch these videos, you give them your time, and therefore you give them money. You're being lied to and you're being grifted to line their wallets. And again, you probably will listen to this, and if you're already too far down that rabbit hole, I can't do anything about it. But I want you to know that it is an incredibly lucrative business to be a right-wing, anti-DEI, anti-women, anti-diversity content creator in this day and age. It makes so much money. Us as marginalized people do not want to take anything from you. We want to exist in this space the same as you do. We want a safe space the same as you do. But also, if your safe space does not include women or people of color, that's something you have to wrestle with, because you might not be a good person. But there is still time to change. Anyway, see you next time.